So last time we talked about while loops. In while loops, we don't necessarily know, or sometimes we don't necessarily know, how many iterations there will be in sort of code to run. So we have a condition to be checked first, and then some code is run. However, what if we do know the number of iterations we're going to do? Well, for that, we have the for loop. So first we go like this. So we have the for loop like that. So what this looks like, this is the autofill. This involves a sort of object, a string, or an array to be iterated through. But we won't be worrying about that. We'll be worrying about arrays in the next chapter. But what we're doing here, basically, let's say I have 10, we predefine our conditions for looping, for iterating through, for repeating a code a number of times. Here we're saying, okay, we're going to go, our counter, which is me I, if you remember last time I had a counter, but this time it's going to be called I. Usually in for loops we have I. We use I and J to make things, type things more easily. And you'll see that a lot in programming. For loops have the letter I in there as their counter. So what we're doing here is, in the for loop, we are defining our conditions for repeating our code inside the curly braces. First, we define a variable to count with. Then we define the loop breaking condition, which here is I reaches up to the point 1 less than 10. As long as I is less than 10, we will repeat the code. And then we have our iteration property. So how are we gonna make our iteration? How we gonna go through iterations? Are we gonna go one by one, maybe by two, and so on? So usually we just keep it one by one. We do I++ or I minus. But you can actually have other ones too, but we might have a look at those, we might not. I'll just, for the sake of simplicity, I will mention plus and minus. So let's see the example from last time. So we're gonna just here see console log hello, and then we're gonna go like this, and we get hello 10 times. So we basically have the same result as the while loop. However, we have everything predefined here. I personally use for loops the most out of all the loops we've had. For loops I use when working with arrays, which we'll see in the next chapter, and you could even use them when to sort of get each character of a string. So I'll also talk about that in the chapter on strings, but let me just show an example right now as well. So we're going to say string equals, we're going to use looping is fun. Spaces are included as characters, by the way. And if you remember from before, so let's erase this. Right, in Sublime Text, we have a lot of auto-completion stuff. And the second for right here, you also have improved for loop. There are some ways, so you could also have backwards, which we'll talk about in a sec. But it's sometimes faster to go from backwards. It depends on your application, which situation you're in, but I tend to go from 0 to the max length of the string, for example. Okay, so here in Sublime Text, the autofill has some sort of things, objects, or something defined. Here we're going to use our string. So basically we're accessing, okay, what we're doing here is we're going to start from 0, and I is going to go all the way up to the length of the string. Remember, 0 is inclusive, so we want to go up to the value right before the length of the string. Basically, that's the ending character, this one right here. And we want to say, okay, increment by 1, so go character by character. And here we'll be accessing the string character by character. This is how you access a certain element, an index, in a value at the index in a character or in a string or an array. We'll talk about those in the later chapters, but just to know, we're accessing each character in the string, character by character, if that makes sense. All right, and then we're just gonna say console, I don't know, what are we gonna say here? Let's just do console log, and we're just gonna say string I1, or just I, and you'll see that instead of writing the string on one line, we took each character on one line. And notice here how in my Firefox it says O is repeated twice. It just saves some space, so it just says 2, but it says looping is fun. So we kind of broke down the string inside. We broke down the string. We took it apart using an array. We'll be seeing that later on with arrays as well. I mean, we broke the string down. I said array. We broke the string down into characters. We'll also be seeing this with arrays as well, but we won't be worrying about that right now. Just showing you some sort of application of a for loop. So we can also go backwards as well. Let's take this example and go backwards. So actually, let's use the autofill to save some time. For, see if this first improved native for loop, we can use that. And it starts from reverse position. So we have I. And Sublime Text is pretty cool. When you press tab, it actually often gives you like multiple selections, so you can tweak all the same variables, all the variables with the same name at the same time. Anyway, so let me just do the same thing as before. Console log string I. And there we go. That's pretty much it with that. So it's going to get the same result. Actually, I did it backwards. Oops, sorry, not the same result. I did it backwards. So because we're going from front to back, that was kind of silly of me. Sorry about that. But anyway, this might come in handy if you're working with arrays. You want to go from end to be, like if you have a sorted array, you might want to get the max value first and then count down. Well, you could do it by starting from the back and getting to the front. All right, so moving on. In JavaScript, we can have actually multiple variables in loop declaration. So in often programming languages, we just stick with one. And for simplistic reasons, we often stick with one loop or counter, sort of. But in JavaScript, we can actually have more than one. But I often don't use this because my loops tend to just work with one sort of structure or one counter. And you just have to be careful with what you're doing. So here, I'm going to have an example where I'm going to have two sums. So sum even, start at 0, and var sum odd equals 0. And what I'm going to do is in the for loop, so let's say from a simple for loop, we're going to have two variables. We're going to have two looping variables, which we'll get to in a sec. And we're going to have it less than or equal to 10. So let's change things a little, start from 1. Okay, so first, what I want to do in this problem, I want to have, based on the counter, I want to add I, or another variable, which is going to be called j, to some even or some odd based on whether if I and or j are odd or even numbers. So we're going to add another sort of iterator, j equals 1. So before the semicolon, so actually I should say each sort of part of a for loop that you define are separated by a semicolon, which is where we actually need semicolons in JavaScript. And the first part is always the variable we're going to use. The second part is always the condition to stop the loop. And the third one is always the sort of iteration. And we can add variables just as if we declare them. So remember where we said var, and we could just basically do this with a comma. Well, we could do the same thing inside the for loop. So we can have var I equals 1, comma j equals 1. So we have two sort of counting variables to keep track of, which we're just going to add to a sum and add to this axis and add it to the sum. And then we're going to have another condition. We can do comma, and while j is less than or equal to 10, so it's sort of like mimicking I. And lastly, we have j++, so j is going to iterate as well. So I mean, you don't really need to do this, but I'm just showing an example of how you can have two or more multiple variables inside a loop. So we're going to have if I is remainder of 2 equals 0 if it's even. We're going to add sum even plus equals I. And then we're going to have else sum odd equals j. Okay, so oops, I forgot the plus. So basically, sum even is going to result in the sum of all even numbers from 1 to 10, and j is going to sum odd is going to result in numbers, odd numbers from 1 to 10, and that's pretty simple. We just display it to the console. Sum odd console sum even. There we go. Save that. Refresh, and you get 25 and 30 respectively. Okay, so remember how I said before, remember what I said before, that we don't have to necessarily use plus here. So let's just make this, let's play around with this a little. So we can let's set I to the value of 0, and we're going to iterate y by 2. And then we're going to set j to 1, and we're going to also iterate j by 2. So it's going to start from 1, and then it's going to just go from 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and then it reaches up to 10, and it stops. Well, it's supposed to reach up to 11, but it never does because of the condition, so it stops at 9. And I is going to start from 0, then plus 2, plus 4, plus 6, and plus 8, and plus 10. And yeah, it'll go normally. So, and then that means we won't need these if conditions anymore, because we're using our iterators to sort of determine that condition. So you can often play with iterators like this, be a little creative in such a way where you can shorten your lines of code a little bit. I mean, you should practice a little first before trying a lot of these tricks with for loops, like play around with for loops a little and get to know them before actually trying to do more advanced things. So let's do this, and this time j results in 20. Well, actually no, the odd result results in 25, and the even result results in 20. So we had 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8 plus 10. Wait, is that correct? So 2. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I just had a brain fart there. So yeah, I think for now that's it on for loops. We'll talk about that in more depth when we talk about objects and arrays. This is just sort of how tell you how they work. And I hope you learned something here, and we'll hope to see you next time.